Information changes everything. That's what we're here to talk about today. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today on this exciting moment less than 3 weeks before the closing of the polls in this election. Making state government work for everyone has been one of my top priorities as Secretary of State. And one of the major pillars of that commitment is transparency. From our push to improve ethics and transparency laws to making Freedom of Information Act requests more efficient and accessible to everyone, we've worked really hard to ensure Michiganders can easily access information that belongs to them. And I also know, and we believe, that democracy works best when an informed and engaged electorate is able to ensure that participation is at the centerpiece of all we do. And I'm very excited today to announce our latest effort to make government more transparent and accessible to the people we serve. For every statewide election since 2020, we have regularly released publicly mail-in voting information in the weeks leading up to Election Day. These early snapshots provide valuable information to voters, media, candidates, and elected officials about how Michigan citizens are engaging in our democracy in that particular cycle. Yesterday, we announced that more than 670,000 Michigan voters have already submitted their ballots 3 weeks ahead of Election Day. That's 31% of the 2.1 million citizens who have requested ballots for the upcoming general election. Today, I am proud now to launch the first ever Michigan Voting Information Dashboard. This dashboard will allow anyone to see how many Michigan citizens are casting their voting ballots ahead of Election Day. It includes views for county and municipality level data and allows users to compare trends across different geographic areas of the state. Anyone can access this dashboard by visiting michigan.gov/voting dashboard. It will be updated daily from the state's qualified voter file to reveal voting trends even as the election is happening. And it helps us build awareness that Election Day is now the last day to cast your ballot, with Michigan citizens having more options than ever before to vote leading up to November 5th at 8 p.m. when the polls close. These data visualizations are accessible by mobile phone, and the dashboard is also fully ADA compliant. As we continue to build this out, we will enable features that allow comparison also across election cycles. The dashboard is also a tool for election security. In addition to transparency and accessibility, the dashboard will promote understanding, placing numbers in context of the laws and procedures that govern our elections. Understanding is one of the most important tools to fighting misinformation. And we've all seen the ways that data taken out of context can be used to distort the truth. That will escalate in the weeks ahead. And we know that as it does, voters will become more and more frustrated as election misinformation becomes increasingly noisier. We also know that official sources of information are more important than ever to help center our conversation on facts and the rule of law, on the truth and the security of our elections. Making those official sources of information more accessible, user-friendly, and easier to understand will make them more useful to all of our citizens. It also will help us pre-bunk misinformation and build trust in our election processes. Now I'm going to turn it over to Michigan Department of State Deputy Chief of Staff Neil Tamby, who will share a brief demonstration of how the Michigan Elections Dashboard will look. Neil?
Thank you, Secretary. Thanks, everyone. On behalf of the team that built the dashboard, I'll give a quick demo. Again, Neil Tamby, Deputy Chief of Staff, serving the Michigan Department of State.
Neil, will you be able to come up here to speak? Because
We can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Accessing the dashboard is easy and is publicly accessible on the Michigan Department of State website. To reach the dashboard, just go to Michigan Department of State website, elections, election results and data, or as the Secretary said, michigan.gov/voting dashboard. The top part of the page has two key features. First, on the right, there are these expandable accordions, which give information about elections and voting in Michigan, as well as specifics about the data on the dashboard, where they come from, how often they're updated, etc. And this information provides context and understanding and builds trust in the data because folks know where it's coming from. There's also a link to a mobile-friendly version of the page, which provides a user-friendly interface and an accessible interface regardless of the device a user is using. And as the secretary said, all pages are fully ADA compliant. Then the user scrolls to get to the dashboard itself. And the focus of this release is absentee and early voting data for the November general election. And as the secretary said, data comes from the qualified voting file and is updated daily. And the qualified voter file is the information system that clerks update every day. And the data in this dashboard about absentee voting and early voting is data that the people of Michigan own and data that folks ask about a lot. We get hundreds of requests through FOIA about these data points, and now it's in the hands of the people of Michigan. The first metrics on the dashboard provide a statewide snapshot, as you can see here. Here and throughout the dashboard, there are also these green icons and links, which when clicked, create a pop-up. These pop-ups give more information about the metric that they're referencing, whether it's definition of terms or more information about the election procedures that are related to the data point that's displayed, which again builds context and understanding for people using the dashboard, even if they're not already experts in elections. The middle part of the page has data views by geography, and I'll just do a quick example of how someone might be able to use this part of the page. A user, maybe they're from Southeast Michigan and they're interested in understanding the differences between counties. So what they can do is either click on the map or the selector up here to look at Wayne County, for example, and the data points on the page will refresh for the geography that's selected. And then they can just click over to the next county that they're interested in to see the corresponding data. A user might also want to look specifically at municipalities. And what they can do is click to the municipality view. And let's say they want to look at the communities in Wayne County. They just hit Wayne. The dashboard refreshes. They can even expand to see a wider view of the dashboard. And to select a specific community, they can either click the map, the drop-down selector, or even just click in the table. And as you can see, once I clicked on the city of Detroit, the dashboard refreshed for that geography. On the very bottom of the page is information about absentee voting and early voting. There are some specific measures here, as well as pop-ups, of course. And as you can see on this page, there's no data available displaying for early voting, and that's of course because early voting hasn't begun yet. But as communities begin early voting, the data will refresh once daily, and what users can expect to see on this page for early voting is a summary count of ballots cast through early voting in that community, as well as two graphs. One will be a graph looking at the day-by-day count of ballots cast for early voting, for example, 100 today, 200 tomorrow. And the final graph is a running total view, so a user can look at the total ballots cast in the selected geography across the entire early voting period. So again, this was a quick demo. We invite you to check out michigan.gov/voting dashboard to look at these data, which we've made transparent, accessible, and within context, so the users of the dashboard can understand what they're looking at.
Thank you, Neil. Data tools like this take a lot of work, and our team has been diligently developing this since June. And I'm really grateful for all the work that went into this, especially in this moment, less than 3 weeks before the polls close, when we want to make sure that striving for information about turnout numbers is available equally across the board to everyone. But we're not going to stop here. This is the first of several phases of election information that we are working to make more accessible and useful. In future iterations of this dashboard will include voter registration statistics and election results, which will be co-designed in collaboration with the University of Michigan School of Information. An important note also about this dashboard and election night results. This will not replace the 83 county clerks' websites across the state, which will continue to be the earliest resource for those returns and the reporting of unofficial results. Voters and the media should still rely on the county clerk websites for that critical information immediately after the polls close on November 5th at 8 p.m. Also joining us today to launch this project is my friend and a really great leader, a nonpartisan professional election administrator for the state of Michigan, and particularly in Canton Township, and that's Clerk Michael Segrist. If you've seen Michael's social media, you know he shares my passion for data and data analysis. And he actually provided us early feedback on the dashboard prototype. So I'm really glad to be able to welcome him here to help us launch it. Michael, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you all. Thank you, Secretary Benson. Thank you to the entire team, the University of Michigan, everyone who put this tool together. I'm extremely excited. It's a very busy time for myself and for my office. We've issued 27,000 absentee ballots, and we've received about 9,000 of them back, about 35%. And if you don't believe me, you can check on the dashboard right now to make sure. But we are getting very busy, and early voting will be starting in Canton Township on Monday, October 21st. We are going to be doing 14 days of early voting. So we're in full swing with the election. I'm very excited about this tool in particular because I spend a lot of my time independently aggregating as much information as I possibly can about the Michigan election system and other communities. And I am required to do that very slowly. And a tool like this will assist me in so many different ways. And part of that is because there is no monopoly on good ideas. And when I see anomalies in the data, I want to know what is causing them and who is implementing what best practice so that I can call that local clerk up and find out just exactly what they're doing that I might not be thinking of. Have I picked the right location for my early voting site? Have I picked the type of facility for my early voting site that is going to help be accessible for voters? These are the kind of questions that I can ask myself when I start looking at what other communities are doing. And I think when you approach elections with curiosity and you follow the information where it's going to, wherever it will lead you, you can begin to create a better system. One of the challenges in modern times that we face is that oftentimes rhetoric has sowed distrust in election results, which is largely stemming from mis and disinformation from the 2020 election and election since. This has created substantial divides in how election results and processes are viewed. At the Canton Clerk's Office, we are enthusiastically working to restore excitement and trust in the elections process. We want to help voters and observers return to an earlier time when faith in elections wasn't contingent upon a desired outcome. One of the largest ways we have done this is through data transparency. The elections belong to the people. It's an extremely public process, and where individuals can obtain a list of voters and lots of information in real time. We provide daily updates out of my office on the absentee ballots received and the ones issued. We use this data locally to evaluate all of our resources to make sure that we can dispatch to precincts effectively so that we are creating an efficient system and that we are providing support, security, and accessibility for our voters in Canton Township. Because information moves quickly online and often accurate data competes with mis and disinformation, it's important that voters are able to distinguish a trusted and reliable source from one that is not. By providing a look under the hood, like this tool does, into ballot requests, ballot returns, early voting turnout, and voter registration statewide at the county level and locally, anyone can do an independent diagnostic check on the entire election system. That's exciting, and I don't know anyone else doing that. More importantly, the information is provided by local clerks, and it is distributed through the Department of State dashboard. It is trusted, reliable, and accurate. With this information, anyone can see how their own community has voted and how it is voting in real time. The public can get a better understanding of how elections work. With an attitude of curiosity, as I said before, the public can be inoculated from that mis and disinformation. It helps build civic understanding and a critical mass of knowledge so that anyone can become, okay, I already said that. I'm obviously delivering prepared remarks, and on that note, I'm just really excited about this opportunity. I'm excited about this tool, and I think it will be, it'll do a lot to help individuals feel more ownership over the entire system itself. And so thank you to everybody who participated in it. I'm really grateful for the ability to have played a very small role in looking at it and its functionality. And again, I'm very excited. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. Thanks, Michael. And thank you for all that you do, especially in these critical weeks for our elections. Also here today is Whitney Quisenberry. Whitney is the director of the Center for Civic Design, who partnered with us on this project. Whitney, can you say a few words, please?
Thank you, Secretary Benson, for inviting us to be part of this and for actually to help with this whole project. And thank you, everybody who's here. As she said, I'm Whitney Quisenberry. I'm the executive director of the Center for Civic Design, where our goal is to make every interaction with government easy, effective, and pleasant. We use our practical experience and our applied research to work with election offices to promote best civic design best practices, support innovation, and invite participation in our democracy. First, I'd like to congratulate Secretary Benson, Mr. Tambay, and the entire team at the Michigan Department of State for what's actually a pretty monumental achievement. At the Center for Civic Design, we like to say that democracy is a design problem. What we mean by that is that every challenge a voter might experience is something that we see as an invitation and an opportunity to use design to build a stronger and more resilient democracy. We were thrilled to renew our partnership with Secretary Benson's team because they also don't back down from a challenge. And instead, use it as an opportunity to improve services for all Michiganders. As we work across the country with other jurisdictions, one of the most common challenges we hear from voters is that information about elections is presented in an unnecessarily complicated way. We also know that election administration and compliance with all the rules is also complex and indeed often thankless work. So people like Mr. Segrist have to do that work while also communicating with people in as many ways as possible to help break down the back office complexity of what they do into how it creates and informs our democracy. New channels, for transparency, like the Michigan Voting Dashboard, making existing data available to the public will help voters understand the election process and help local election offices communicate without adding to their enormous workload. As Secretary Benson shared, the Michigan Voter Dashboard reflects her commitment to government transparency. Beyond the simple goal of transparency, the dashboard presents early voting and absentee data in Michigan with cutting-edge design and technical best practices. It doesn't just make data available, it also makes it easily accessible, understandable, presents it beautifully, and encourages trust in Michigan's election administration. I think it really does put Michigan at the forefront of election data visualization and transparency in the country, and I'm confident that people will find it easy to use. We're honored to once again partner with the Michigan Secretary of State. I'm grateful to the Secretary Benson for bringing in our team's design expertise on a key strategic initiative. But I'd also like to thank the partners across the Department of State and Technology at the Department of Technology Management and Budget, the Department of State, and the clerks across the state who helped make this dashboard possible. I believe this dashboard is really just the beginning, and we look forward to more opportunities to help create innovations that further trust and transparency in Michigan's elections. Thanks.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you very much, and I'm so grateful for your investment as well in helping make this first phase a reality. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor Scott Tenbrink. He's an instructor at the University of Michigan School of Information. UMSI is partnering with us on future versions of this dashboard.
Thank you, Secretary Benson. The School of Information at the University of Michigan is proud of our tradition of disseminating knowledge completing research and educating our state's youth, along with across the country, on issues around information and the public sector. We have had great opportunity to partner with municipal and state level government in many ways. In my own small part at the university, I've worked in Jackson, I've worked in Traverse City, I've worked in Detroit, Ferndale, and Dearborn, and many other places to address information challenges in the public sector and with local government. We're excited for the opportunity to do that again, because that education of students is not just training them to be information professionals, to be UX designers and researchers, or data analysts and scientists, but also to prepare them to be the citizens that will lead and engage in the challenges of the future. And projects like this, like providing transparency, managing privacy, and providing equity around information for the people of our state are projects that we're excited to be involved with. So I'm particularly excited to have a student group work on the next iteration, the expansion of data that's available in this voter dashboard. And I'll have Jackson come up and talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you very much. Yes, we also now have Jackson Gelbard here to share a few words as a member of the UMSI student team on this project. Jackson.
Thank you, Secretary Benson. Throughout my life, I have always been intrigued by how people, data, and technology intersect. My curiosity motivated me to attend the University of Michigan and study how we can use large data sets not just to analyze trends, but to help solve some of today's most complex problems. I believe data can be a powerful tool for positive change, whether it's improving communication, enhancing user experience, or making critical systems like election dashboards more transparent and accessible. I'm honored and excited to work on a project where I can leverage my passion for data and technology to make a meaningful impact. As students, we see this as an incredible opportunity to apply what we've learned at the University of Michigan School of Information to contribute positively to the future. Our goal is to increase understanding and improve trust by providing voters, clerks, officials, and other key stakeholders with a single, reliable source for election data. Thank you to the Michigan Department of State for this incredible opportunity. Our group is excited to set a new standard for how citizens interact with and consume data. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson, and to all of the students and faculty here representing UMSI. I'm always looking for more ways to use data to make our department better and more responsive to all of our citizens. We did this when we modernized our Secretary of State branch offices, leveraging customer service best practices from the private sector and our own internal data to bring wait times down significantly. Now more than 92% of our customers are seen within 20 minutes of their scheduled visit time, and we anticipate that this election data will also help us understand how to continually make more processes more efficient and effective, building on our commitment to safe, secure, accessible elections in Michigan. Now I'm happy to take a few questions.
Could you talk about how you anticipate that this will, I guess, help in the voter misinformation, disinformation campaign? What specifically, in what ways do you think that this can sort of tamp down on some of that?
Well, we'll specifically show all of the data we have illuminating where people are voting, in what way they're voting, and demystify some of the questions many people have when there's a vacuum around this information. Michael, I don't know if you want to add to this as well, because I know it's been at the centerpiece of why we wanted to develop this. We know that election misinformation is very frustrating to voters, and what adds to that frustration is if they don't know where to get the data, the facts, the truth. We set up michigan.gov/election facts to answer many questions about, for example, example, how we ensure when someone passes away, they're removed from the voter rolls, or that only U.S. citizens are voting. This now adds to that by providing real-time information about where people are voting and in what numbers, and we hope will help demystify rumors and conspiracy theories by providing just accurate data in real time to everyone, the same information to all who would like to see it. And all of that will strengthen voters' understanding of what's actually happening in our elections, and we hope both pre-bunk and debunk misinformation that will come their way. Michael, did you want to add to that at all?
Sure.
Okay.
Just a little bit. You know, what's hard is, I think, there's always been mis and disinformation in our society around lots of things. It crept into the elections process pretty aggressively in recent history. What's hard about that is I think a lot of times that exists on an emotional level, and it's not necessarily a cerebral level. And sometimes it masquerades as valid information, but it's really noise. It's you know, there's claims that are made that are just factually inaccurate, or items are called a risk when they're statistically insignificant. And to get out of the emotional part, you really have to have information. That's the entire purpose of education and thinking. And so I think what's cool about a dashboard like this is when a claim is made or when something comes forward that is just extremely inaccurate, the mis and disinformation itself can be fact-checked against the valid information. Additionally, it just helps by people truly understanding how elections work. If I know that only a qualified registered elector can request an absentee ballot, and I know that only 500 absentee ballots have been issued on this day, then you know, I begin as a citizen of this country and the state of Michigan to have enough understanding of the elections process to say, you know, what I'm reading or what I'm hearing you say does not, it cannot be accurate based on the information I have. And also, you know, if there are like, you know, wild claims frequently get made about voter rolls, or they get made about individuals who are not qualified to vote. You know, you think about, people talk about Chicago in the 1960s. I think that's still a part of the popular lexicon. And so you can turn to things and say, wow, that's interesting. It looks like voter turnout is only 48%. That's an interesting comment that you're making, because I would be surprised if there was, you know, votes were being manufactured, I would imagine, to see a higher turnout rate. And so you really can become a true active participating citizen of this country by understanding how elections work. And a lot of what we do is in elections is, you know, it's critical infrastructure. So a lot of what we do, because of security, we do have to have information secure and protected. But this stuff, the results, the data, the information, you know, that stuff is extremely public, and the only barrier people have to good education and understanding is their interest, and then now they have the data provided right for them in real time. It's fantastic.
Can I ask a question, follow-up question?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. My question concerns absentee ballots. Now, I know how they work, and you know how they work, but a lot of people don't. And so my question is this: there's a lot of disinformation on this particular topic with inside voting. Okay, so for instance, I listened to a talk show host locally who would talk about, you know, I got 5 ballots, absentee ballots. That means I can vote 5 times. You and I know you cannot. Okay, and that those are applications. He would leave off the application part of it. So my question is, with this project, what are you doing to sort of demystify the absentee ballot process?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I can talk about that at the local level, and but I do know that the Department of State has been doing a lot of work on on educating about the elections process and doing fact checking and things like that. So I can briefly talk about it from the local level. We have been doing an aggressive social media campaign, and a lot of that is around the difference between a ballot application and an absentee ballot. And and also educating individuals on that process. So we have that information. It does require an individual to intentionally interact with that information, but we do push that out there. A lot of it is just kind of the old-fashioned having those conversations with people who are concerned about it. And then recently, I've been working. I just did we're working on a project with Michigan Radio where they are actually tracking an individual requesting an absentee ballot. They voted their absentee ballot. They returned their absentee ballot in a drop box. And then we've done interviews in our office on when we received it, when we verified the signature. And so to that end, there's a level of demystification by taking that entire process and specifically the public parts of it and making it public so that an individual with that interest can learn the process and not be concerned about it. So,
Thank you, Michael.
Would you like to add something to that?
So, first of all, the mail-in voting process is more transparent than ever before. We actually have a tracking system on our website, michigan.gov/vote, where people can ensure that they're tracking their ballot requests, their personal ballot request, when it's sent, when it's returned, when it's received. In addition, this dashboard helps you see the aggregate data, what communities are requesting the most, where it's coming out, when are coming in. And then when misinformation emerges like, oh, I thought I saw 500 ballots dumped at an absentee counting board in the middle of the night, you can actually go to this website and see that that wasn't the case. That in that case, that was famously media equipment that was being brought in. But in this, which was very helpful because the media knew right away how to debunk that. But in particular, this empowers every citizen to, when they hear that, actually go to this dashboard and investigate. Are there suddenly 200 more ballots being turned in the middle of the night? And when you go to the dashboard, what you see is only ballots that were received before 8 p.m. are counted, and ballots emerging or being delivered to a counting board after 8 p.m. are ones that were received before 8 p.m., validated, processed, and then sent to the board for tabulation. So all of that becomes instantly accessible in a numeric, granular way by community to community, and statewide for anyone who would like to sincerely answer these questions and not rely on anyone but their own eyes and ears and understanding of the data that they have access to, just as the media would or anyone else would in that particular moment. So we hope it will speed up the fact-checking process. It will empower more citizens to be a part of that fact-checking process. And again, we couple this with the michigan.gov/election facts website that will go into more granular detail on the question of whether or not dead people are voting or what happens when you send a ballot in and how someone's ID is verified.
Hi, I have a twofer here.
Yeah.
What security layers are in place to make sure the dashboard is not a soft target for cyber attacks? And then also, do you want to take this moment to get ahead how no one's personal information is actually on the dashboard?
Yep. Yeah, two things. One, this is data at an aggregate level. It is not relating to specific ballots or specific individuals, or even in communities where there are small numbers of people voting. We will actually not display data if there's only 10 or less voters in a particular community, because we want to protect the privacy of those voters in that smaller community. Michigan has 1,520 local communities that will be voting. Not all of them have hundreds of voters. So we are very mindful of making sure that aggregate data is available here, statistical data is available here, personal data is not. Secondly, with regards to protecting the security of the database, Neil, I don't know if you have anything to add, but we work closely with the Department of Management, Technology, and Budget on all things to protect against any type of cybersecurity attacks on any aspect of our election equipment and process. So we would be, we have all of the layers of security that we need to have on this resource, just as we do on all of our websites with regards to the state of Michigan, and those will continue to in place. We're also, of course, working with federal cybersecurity experts to continue to ensure every aspect of our websites are secure and monitoring that. Our bigger, I should put it a different way, the easier target for cybersecurity problems are actually local websites that don't have those same levels of security. And that's where we've also focused on upgrading many local websites to be on a .gov server, for example, which is one of the most important things you can do to protect against cyber attacks, and a number of other things. So we have an eye towards those local websites as well, which could be impacted by cyber attacks. But I have great confidence at the Michigan.gov level that we've got access to all of the best practices and resources that one would need to protect not just this website from cyber attacks, but any others on our server.
Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit, I mean, we are obviously getting real close here.
Mhm.
And obviously the voters of Michigan voted in early voting, and so there's more options than ever in terms of people being able to cast that ballot. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then once they do, you're able to verify signatures in advance, but can you talk about when actual counting of ballots in terms of votes and who voted for whom, when that actually starts, and how long you think that will take?
Yeah, so first, early voting. This is the first major election where we have 9 days of early voting, at least, available to every citizen in our community, in our state. I think it remains to be seen how much education will go into helping citizens in these final 3 weeks, and certainly when early voting starts, amplify that opportunity. But because it's new, our research also shows, for example, that only 54% of voters age 18 to 29 are aware of early voting as an option at this point. Whether that changes in the weeks ahead as more attention focuses on the process, as other states like Georgia are in the news for early voting, I'm hopeful that we'll see more people know about early voting as a result. But that's something that will play out in the weeks ahead, particularly once early voting starts in Detroit on Saturday, October 19th. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this portal, because every day you'll be able to go in and see how many people voted in that particular community. And I know for me and many others, that's going to be really interesting. And for those seeking to educate in a nonpartisan way citizens about their opportunity to vote early, they'll have, of course, everyone will have access to that information as well. And we'll be able to see if there are lower participation communities, higher participation communities, and that just helps fuel our educational efforts across the board and target them to who really needs to hear about this option. So I'm hopeful this dashboard will help inform the citizens of Michigan even more about this early voting opportunity in this first election. Secondly, we are very mindful of the importance of having these unofficial results in as soon as possible. I know, we consistently say efficiency is of top of mind once those polls close to get those unofficial results out in every community, but we won't sacrifice security or accuracy for efficiency or speed. All that said, there's probably few people other than candidates themselves who want to have these unofficial results out more than the election officials, because that's the number one question we're going to get between when the polls close and our unofficial results in every community are made public. That said, I have full confidence because of that every community is going to be working as efficiently as possible with security and accuracy checks in place to ensure every valid vote and only valid votes are tabulated as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. New this year, well, I shouldn't mention, in November of 2020, was our highest turnout election in Michigan's history, and over 2/3 of citizens voted absentee in an election where our clerks weren't able to begin processing or tabulating those votes until Election Day itself. Now, even with all of those challenges in place and a global pandemic, I'm very proud that we were still able to have every ballot and every valid vote counted by midday Wednesday, the day after Election Day, within 24 hours of the polls closing. So that's our benchmark. Now this year, we have, possibly because we're not in a pandemic, less people voting absentee, perhaps. That's certainly what our data is showing at this point. More people perhaps voting early, which means their ballots are tabulated as they vote. And in addition to that, importantly, communities across the state have the option to begin processing and tabulating their absentee ballots 9 days before the election day throughout the early voting process. All of that would suggest that we may see unofficial results even sooner. But two things that could challenge that are, one, if citizens don't return their ballots until 8 p.m. on Election Day. That means that no matter how many times or hours we'd have leading up to that moment to begin processing and tabulating, if we don't get the ballot until 7 p.m. or 8 or 7:55, it still has to go through a process before it's tabulated. So we want citizens to know there's something you can do if you want those ballots and those counted efficiently and those results in as soon as possible. Turn your ballot in now and as soon as possible to help assist our clerks in ensuring valid votes are tabulated and processed long before the polls close on Election Day. The last thing I'll say on that is, of course, if any election is close, that will also extend the question marks over the ultimate winner, and there will be any procedures in place, like recounts, that could extend that even further. So we'll know closer to November 5th. We'll be able to give more predictions about when we'll have those unofficial results available. But my hope and optimistic prediction at this point is that it would be within 24 hours of the polls closing or by 8 p.m. on Wednesday.
I know in 2022, you talked about youth voting just a second ago. Michigan led the country
Mhm.
in youth vote, but we know that only about 60% of those who were registered in that age group actually voted. Maybe I can get this on the portal, but how are things faring this year?
Mhm.
And what is the Department of State and its various partners doing to kind of close that gap?
Yeah, we have really been laser focused holding youth vote roundtables all across the state, from Traverse City to Marquette to Alpena to Grand Rapids to Detroit and everywhere in between, talking with young citizens about how we can mobilize the close to 1 million or more 18 to 29-year-old eligible citizens, many of whom are already registered, to actually vote this year. We've also been counseling the nonpartisan voter education efforts that come our way to not just focus on voter registration of young voters, but actually getting people to vote after they're registered as well, which is really why we're seeing a space. I'm very gratified that in 2020, we saw over 50% of young people, young eligible voters, vote in our state. And in 2022, as you mentioned, we led the nation in youth vote turnout. Yet in that election, only 37% of 18 to 29-year-old eligible citizens participated. And that means to us, over 60% did not. As we've done a deeper dive into those numbers, we've noticed that many of those who aren't voting do not have a college experience, and so a lot of college outreach, for example, may not reach them. And so we've tried to engage barbershops and a number of other apprenticeship programs in educating citizens who are 18 to 29 and all citizens about their options to vote this year. We've also launched, and you'll begin seeing this in the days ahead, a nonpartisan voter education effort that will proactively run on billboards and through text messages all across the state, targeting young voters to ensure they know their options to vote and how important it is that their voice is heard in this election. So I'm optimistic that we'll stay ahead of the curve and continue to lead the nation on youth vote turnout, but that will ultimately reside with whether or not these efforts work at engaging young voters in participating. The last thing I'll say is our research shows that over 50% of young people who aren't voting often say they aren't voting because they don't have time. So we hope that early voting, in particular, when young voters know about their option to vote early on a Saturday or Sunday before Election Day, that will help them find time to vote and recognize the importance of doing so in this critical election.
How many
Yeah.
ULC AVA votes, ballots do you anticipate, and how do we qualify where they're registered, what precinct they're in?
Will UOCAVA voters be on this website as well? Voters who are voting overseas?
And how many do you anticipate?
In
Go
this
ahead.
release, no, but we're always thinking about potential future releases, so we'll put that down for that.
Yeah, and we'll be tracking that as well. It's hard to know in any given cycle. It's usually not as high as in other states because many voters in Michigan are here and not living overseas, so it's not as high as a state like a Florida or Texas where you have active duty military bases throughout the state. And as a result, many active duty service members serving abroad, a high proportion of active duty service members serving abroad. So that said, we'll continue to get that information out. It's hard to make any predictions at this point of those numbers, but we will certainly, as we have them more and more, make sure they're publicly available.
Does this break down by precinct, how many people are registered in each precinct?
This release of the dashboard breaks down data by jurisdiction and county, and it's for absentee voting and early voting. Detailed data on registration is not in this release, but as some speakers have said, that is one of the backlog items we have for upcoming future releases.
Yep, and same for precinct level data.
How many people are registered to vote in the state of Michigan right now as we speak?
So you have, in terms of the number of active registered voters in our state, do you want to pull that up?
It's 7.8
Or
million.
7.8 million active registered voters in our state.
And a state of 10 million people, there's,
Well, the 10 million residents are not all are not all citizens and over the age of 18. And so that's why you get the 10 million number, and then you have a smaller number based on census data of eligible citizens, and then within that you have people who are registered to vote. Okay? All right, thanks guys, thank you all.